Hi. This one we're going to freestyle a little bit. I'm going to show you some of my favorite chords or the way I do chords that may be a little bit different than what you're used to, and hopefully explain a little bit of why, and maybe that'll help you in your playing a little bit, and just hope you enjoy it. So let's get into it. Um, One of the things I do a lot of times is I remove the third note from a chord. What do I mean by third note? Well, if you know the scale, let's talk about major chords now. Major scale for A goes like this. Okay, so the third note in that scale is, let's move it down to G. Let's talk about G. Okay. The third note, I want to leave out the third note in the G chord. Okay, we look at that and we can tell, because we're familiar with this by now, the third note is a B. But we also know in our basic G chord that that's part of our basic G chord. We're doing the modern G with that finger added there, which doesn't really make anything different. It's still a G. Not G2 or anything like that. It's just a G. But we want to leave out that third note. How do we do it? Like this? No, that's a different chord. While interesting, it's not what we want. To leave it out, the easiest way in our situation here is to mute that string. And so you may see me playing something like this and not realize that I'm actually, that string with the B note, it's just muted. You don't even hear it. So this finger is actually doing the job of muting it, and maybe I'll touch it with the other finger too, just to have a little extra added muting. And when I play it, here's the original. Here's my one without the third. You may not be able to hear the difference that well in this video, and I encourage you to experiment with that. But it basically cleans up the chord a little bit, especially when you're playing in a band. A lot of times if you play that third note on the acoustic guitar, it makes a little bit of a mess in the mix when you mix with other instruments, and especially if you play electric guitar. If you have distortion on, the third note can make an absolute mess of your sound. So just leave out that third note, experiment with it, and see what you find useful. What have I done here? Trying to get into a position where I can show you things better. The C. A lot of times I'll actually use C2 instead of C. And the same thing with the third note. I leave out the third note, which happens to be this finger again. Same principle, I mute that next string. Now, you could play the normal C and use that finger to mute the next string as well, which the note we're not playing is an E. Now, we know that the E does appear on that first string. Which, you know, you could mute it there too. You end up with a really reduced number of notes, but anyway, if we're playing C2, the E's not there if we mute that third string. C2 doesn't always fit. Sometimes you do just actually want the whole C. It's not that big a deal. If you're playing electric guitar and you're doing just you have distortion, you're just hitting the chord, you're probably just going to play a power chord anyway, which does not have the third note. You just, those three notes right there. Same thing with G. A lot of times though, when I'm hitting a chord with distortion or electric guitar, what I end up doing is I just mute a bunch of notes and hit the strings that are open. I'm not worried about the bass note because we have a bass guitarist. That's his job. Um, so that's my G and my C. That's C2. I've heard people refer to it as the worshipped C. Any 2 chord is used in a lot of modern Christian worship, and it just sounds nice. A kind of, you have more strings open on the acoustic guitar, specifically A2. Go up to D2 very easily. Sounds kind of open and airy, which is a good feeling for what people are going for in modern Christian worship. I should tell you how to do that. A2, you got your A chord, just let that one finger dangle. That's A2. D2, just let. And when you see that written in, they say, the chord here is A2. And if you can't remember what I just showed you right there, remember this. You know you're doing the A scale. A2. That's the 2. That's a B. So you're back here doing the A, and you're like, how do I add a B? Well, experiment. You know the B is right there. But if you do that, well, something weird just happened. No, because you still want the A as the bass note. So don't mess with your bass note. Now, you know this is the B string. So if you could just play that open, you have a B now. There's also a B right there. Oh, now you have another one. You have a B here and a B here. So just use what you have left of the A chord, which is really you're only fretting that one string. You leave everything else open, play the strings 1 through 5, and you have a very interesting A2. Now with the D, you're starting your scale here. So the E is the 2 note in the D. Now of course you know you got the E string very simply down there. Alright? Same principle. Just experiment. You know, you don't have to stick to just that if you know that this is the D2. Well, try to figure out how you can play that differently, you know? You're adding the E. You know there's an E right there too. You could say, do this, and you still need that D bass note, so you can... It's crazy. Yeah, I know that looks painful. It's, you know, after a while it would be. But, you know, just experiment with stuff. Don't be afraid, you know. Figure out what technically would be the chord and find out what works best for your fingers and find out where you can put it anywhere on the fretboard and experiment leaving different strings open, see what happens. You know, don't be afraid to experiment with that stuff. That's how, you know, people have innovated their sounds, and adding just a little bit of dissonance here and there, and you know, that you may think that sounds horrible, but sometimes it may be the right effect in something. Throw some distortion on that. You're holding the 2nd fret, the 2nd string, at the 6th fret, and playing the 1st and 2nd string, and that's pure dissonance. Throw some high distortion on that, and then or play the 5th fret on the 2nd string, unison, and just start to bend that note up with some high distortion on it. And push really hard and see what happens, you know? Maybe you can't use it. Maybe you can, you know that that's there, and you're playing a song and you have this solo one time, and all of a sudden you decide that. Try it. You know your instrument. Figure out what it can do, what it can't do, and what it does when you do different crazy things to it. That's my advice. You know, use the same principle, finding the 2 note for the different chords. 2s and 9s, very interesting chords. Figure those out. And so now you have the tools, if you apply them, to interpret those strange chord things. One more thing I'll add quick before I finish is you'll sometimes see something like an A over E. What does that mean? It means you're playing the A chord, but your bass note is E. How would you do that if you're down here? Well, you got your A, bottom 5 strings, and you want your bass note to be E. Well, there's an E. Maybe you can't hear it much in what I'm playing right now, but that's what it is. Another way to do it is leave off that A right there. That's a very dominant sounding bass note anyway, and you don't want that. If it's A over E, the E has to be the bass note. So maybe mute that last A. Or play only the first 4 strings. That's also A over E. A over E means your bass note is E. D over C means your bass note is C. You make a D chord and add that C note in there. Whoops. Sounds horrible right there, but it is very useful in some places. That's how you do your bass notes. You find, like I said, find what works for you. Ask other guitarists what they do, how they do that D over C and all that crazy stuff, and share experience. And this is how we grow. And I encourage you, keep strumming, have fun.